To install the rear skeleton doors on your Polaris Expedition XP or ADV, follow these steps. Park the vehicle on a flat level surface, ensure the vehicle is in park, and remove the key. Remove 6 push-pin rivets from the lower B-pillar trim. Then turn the top of the trim away from the vehicle and lift the trim to disengage the lower tab. Next, find the bracket and the limit strap on the B-pillar. Then remove 2 screws and the limit strap bracket from the rear of the B-pillar. Next, close the door and engage the door with the striker. This will help support the door while the hinge screws are removed. Then remove the 4 hinge screws. The doors are large and may weigh up to 60 pounds or 27 kilograms. Use assistance when lifting and moving the doors if necessary. Next, pull the door handle to disengage the striker and lift the door away from the vehicle. Set the door on a flat surface with the outside facing down. Protect painted/plastic surfaces with protective cloth or tape during removal or installation. Remove and retain 4 screws from the door and 2 door hinges. To prepare the skeleton door, install the hinges and 4 screws. Tighten screws to specification. Then install 2 screws, 2 nuts, and the limit strap bracket. Then tighten screws to specification. Repeat on the other side. Next, place the rear door in the opening and engage the striker with the door latch to help support the weight of the door. Then, loosely install the 4 hinge screws. Do not torque at this time. To adjust the rear door, start by inspecting the outer edges of the door to make sure the gaps are even on the rear side and bottom of the door. Make sure that the trim panel on the door lines up with the vehicle trim. After the door is properly positioned, torque the hinge screws to specification. Next, after the door is properly positioned, check the engagement with the striker. Adjust the striker up or down as needed for proper latching. If the door does not seal or rattles when latched, adjust the striker inward. If the door is difficult to open, adjust the striker outward. Remove the striker cover to access the striker screws. Then, when finished adjusting the striker, torque the striker screws to specification and replace the cover. Next, thread the bracket through the limit strap and install the bracket and 2 screws to the B-pillar. Torque bracket screws to specification. Then put the lower tab of the B-pillar into the opening. Turn the top of the trim toward the vehicle and install 6 push-pin rivets. Repeat all steps on the other side. When hinges are removed from the half doors, the hinge nut plate inside the door will be loose and could fall out of place. If the hinges are to be reattached to half doors, it will be necessary to remove the trim panels from the door. With the trim panels removed, the hinge nut plate can be located and replaced in its proper position. Next, turn the door over and remove and retain the handle cover by prying up the cover. Then remove and retain the screw to separate the handle from the actuator. Next, lift the handle away from the actuator and pull backwards to remove the handle. Keep the handle for later installation. Then, remove and retain the 4 push-pin rivets from the front of the door. Next, remove and retain the 3 push-pin rivets from the rear of the door. Then move the filler panel toward the rear and lift to remove the panel. Keep the panel for later installation. Next, remove and retain the 4 screws. Then move the trim panel toward the rear and lift to remove the panel. Keep the panel for later installation. Repeat on the other side. For more information, see your authorized Polaris dealer or visit Polaris.com.